Hi, this is Romesh Srivastu, Editor-in-Chief, SightsIn Plus. SightsIn Plus is an HR magazine which is started in 2017, and after the overwhelming response on the magazine, we have started also the YouTube channel. Please subscribe this for the HR updates, for the HR news, for the conversation with the top-notch CHROs, and some case studies. The agenda of this video is design thinking in human resources. I'll start off by saying only a few things that design thinking is a process for the creative problem solving, and when it applies to the HR, that brings a human centric approach. To discuss in detail, we have an eminent HR leader, Harini Sreenivasan. She is a partner with the Semcostyle Institute India, based at Bangalore, and this firm is a business transformation consulting organization. And prior to this Semcostyle, Harini was working with the World India as Chief People Officer, the Global Delivery Center, and previously she has been associated with the companies like Immersion Network Power, Simtime Global Solutions, L&T Infotech, etc. Harini, I would like to come to you and would like to know what is the design thinking actually?
You just mentioned, so first of all, let me say I'm happy to be here, Ramesh. It's really interesting to actually speak with you. We have communicated so much through words, written words, and now the verbal words. Design thinking, like you said, it is creative problem solving in a way, but how is it different from typical problem solving is it involves a user-centric approach. So whether design thinking is in HR or not, the whole methodology is it keeps the ultimate end user in the center of things. Now, all the more because this is user centric, because it keeps the end user in the middle, and then the problem solving methodology actually works around the end user, the applicability of design thinking in HR becomes kind of automatic, I would say. If we are not able to apply design thinking as a methodology in HR, I think we are missing something. We are missing a great opportunity. And therefore, to me, design thinking in HR is kind of automatic and obvious. Because for HR, whatever, let's not call it problem solving for the moment. Let's just call making employee experience a lot more enriching. If we were to define HR's role in that manner, what can be a better way than design? That's how I would put it. It's
Right.
kind of automatic and obvious.
Right. So next, I would like to come that how we can apply the design thinking in human resources.
Right. So design thinking has a framework of steps. It has a methodology. It's a method. It is not magic. That's a disclaimer that I always say, that you can't say that you will apply design thinking and abracadabra, you will see something happening. It's not like that. There is a method. And there is a way in which you progress through the different stages. What is extremely critical for uh, design thinking to work for any of the problems that or the challenges that you want to solve is the very first stage, which in design thinking parlance we call it as empathy, where the designer is actually trained to look at the challenge or the problem statement through the eyes of the end user. Now look at it in HR, right? All of us in HR, one of our most favorite deliverables as an HR leader would be maybe to come up with HR policies, HR policy manual, isn't it? All of us fancy doing that. And it always amuses me when a lot of people ask around in groups that, do you have an editable version of this policy in your organization? Can you share it with me? Because I want to make one for my organization. Well, it's not a bad idea. It's great if people are able to share best practices, etc. But what eventually happens is when you look at a policy document which someone else has created for another organization, and we try and apply it as it is to our organization,
Right.
right? So if you have to apply design thinking in HR, what the empathy phase, the first phase does is you look at the problem statement or the need in your organization, not just through your eyes, but through every user's eye. So when you do that, you're actually bringing it into context. And then you draft your own policy document, right? After that, you So now when you're drafting a policy document, it is not something which you are drafting. It is something which is coming from the needs of the people. So when it's coming from the needs of the people, imagine how much of ownership they will have on that, right? So you understand the problem statement from the user's end, you redefine what is it that you want to draft, start with the why, and then go back to the people and engage with them on what are all the aspects that you want in that policy document or in that procedure. Let them deliberate, let them discuss, let them open up and speak their mind as to what they want, what they would love to see, what is it that they would love to have. Together, you co-create something, co-create a policy, co-create a procedure, and let the users themselves test it and see if it works, if it makes sense. And once that testing is done, you then roll out the policy. Now, here I'm talking about design thinking in action in HR. Instead of picking up something which works well for someone else and assuming that it will work well for us,
Right.
when you apply design thinking, it makes sense to have your own people take a step back, talk about what is it that we want to achieve through a policy, then brainstorm on what are all things that we can put together, come out with a prototype version which can be tested, and then test and then implement it. Now see the difference in the when you are doing something by a traditional method, okay, that is traditional problem solving, right? If you want to come up with a policy, do it in a traditional method. What happens is you starting with an assumption that I know what's best for my organization. You're actually having you're blinded towards what other people in the organization, the end users, feel. That's what happens in traditional thinking. But when you do design thinking, you're starting with I don't know, tell me more. You're starting with absolutely no assumption. And when you start with an assumption, non-judgmental assumption of I don't know, tell me more, what you actually get is what is it that people are looking for? It may be points which you may have missed in your assumption. So that's what design thinking does when you apply it in HR.
Very rightly said. That is when we are talking about the design thinking in HR. So we are moving away from the assumptions. We are talking on the real-time problems, what the real-time problems are, and what the employees are feeling there, what they need actually. So based on this, so do we need to have any kind of survey or anything? How we can reach to the conclusion that this is what our employees need, and we can frame the policy that will work for our organization.
Yeah, the beauty is in design thinking methodology, there is a survey which happened without people's knowledge that it's a survey. Okay. I must tell you that when you launch a survey, right, typically how the human brain will look at a survey is, here is an opportunity for me to point out grievances, okay, highlight things which I disagree with. It may not be very authentic if the survey is not worded very well. You require psychologists, behavioral scientists to word the survey questions in such a way that people answer without judgment and without a bias, right? But in design thinking, what happens is we don't launch a survey. We have a lot of engaging conversations with all the different stakeholders that are related to that problem statement. And in design thinking, we call that as user personas. So the designer or the design thinking team, they have conversations, non-judgmental, non-biased conversations with all the different user personas on what they think and feel about that particular challenge, what they see around themselves as a challenge, what are the limitations that they face, and what have they been doing to deal with it. What are the pains and gains? Now, these are all conversations that happen in a very candid manner without bias. And we are not asking them for their opinion. We are actually triggering what they think and feel and what they see and what they hear and what they do. So rather than a survey which is still looking at it from our perspective and analyzing the findings of the survey, The empathy phase does a bit more. It looks at the problem statement from every user persona's perspective. So the empathy phase is something which actually helps us nail down on what really is the problem statement. Let me give you a very small example. In one organization, I was told that the dress code policy is not being followed by anybody. And we want you to crack the whip and tell people that the dress code policy cannot be flouted and there will be penalty. Right? So this was a challenge, problem statement, right? Now, if I were to look at it with my own assumptions, I will look around and see, oh yes, the dress code policy is not being followed. And then I would mandate it, put a penalty to it, right? But is that going to give us what we want? Now, for me to understand what is it that we want, it's not enough if I look at it only from the management perspective or my perspective. I need to go around and talk to people and find out what they feel and think about the existing dress code policy. Right? Now, several of those conversations revealed to me that the dress code policy was not applicable directly to the particular city where this business was based. It was obviously copied from somewhere and it was not applicable directly there. And people wanted something different because the weather conditions in that city was different. Right? So when I went back, all that I had to do is, if this is what people think, all that I had to do is go back and make a very simple policy saying each one of us is the brand ambassador of this organization. We carry the brand of this organization, and therefore it is appropriate. I mean, it is important that we dress appropriately for client meetings. The dress code policy did not have to exist at all. I could go away and scrap the policy because the people told me that what they want is the freedom to dress in a particular way to suit the weather conditions of that city. But when they were told that the image in front of the client is very important and you are the custodian of the image, they very quickly decided when to do what. So, you don't need a survey, but you need to look at the problem statement from every user's eyes.
But I understand that we need to have a unbiased conversation, engaging conversation with the employees before framing the policy and before applying here the design thinking process. So now we are coming to the what are the benefits of this design thinking when we apply to the human resources.
The biggest benefit, as I see, is that when you apply design thinking, it's not the HR leader who is mandating or dictating the policies or the way work has to happen. When you use design thinking, it is each and every end user who's coming up with how this policy should look like, or how a particular way of working should look like, how a meeting should be run. Instead of the manager or the HR leader saying, instructing, do it in this manner, design thinking shifts the accountability of the success of the policy, the procedure, the meeting, the way of working, whatever. It transfers the accountability to the end user. So the biggest benefit is you don't have to do anything afterwards to ensure compliance with that particular policy or procedure if you use design thinking. For an HR professional, what can be a bigger benefit than that? When you don't have to follow up with people to follow it, to comply with it, right? So, for example, performance appraisal. होता है ना HR का season, performance appraisal season, and all of us, on the HR desk, it becomes our routine to go and follow up with people to complete the process. Now, if we use design thinking here, right, and we engage all the stakeholders, the managers, the employees, the supervisors, everybody, get a sample of them and go back to them and discuss with them that what is it that we can do to make performance appraisal process a lot more engaging and enriching for you. Imagine a situation where they come up with a design where the whole process is meaningful. You don't have to follow up for completion because they know that this is going to give us a meaningful outcome. And before you know it, things will happen on its own. So to me, this is the biggest benefit. The second benefit that I see in applying design thinking in HR is Design thinking helps you to contextualize anything for your organization. I strongly believe that every organization is unique. It has a fingerprint of its own, right? Whether it is a startup, whether it is a family managed business, whether it is a large organization, whether it is a conglomerate of several businesses, every organization has its uniqueness. Design thinking helps you to contextualize any solution for your organization and maintain that uniqueness without damaging that uniqueness. This is the second benefit that I see. The third benefit that I see is, if I reflect back on my experience, all those processes, procedures, initiatives that I did in my life as an HR leader, whatever has outlived me, whatever has stood the test of time, are all those where I had applied design thinking. Wherever I had gone ahead and said, I know the best solution, let's do this, where I could have applied design thinking, those things did not stand the test of time. So I think for making your initiatives, your ideas, and your processes, procedures sustainable, design thinking comes a long way because it gets rooted in people's minds, in the end users' mind. So I think these are the three benefits I would say.
So I think we have discussed about the design thinking and how to apply in the human resources. So anything more would like to share that is important and we didn't include into this?
Definitely. There are a few points which I think people should be aware of when they think about design thinking, right? There are a few myths I want to bust. The first one being design thinking is not, it's not a magic. It's not something which happens like that quickly. It is a method which progresses in a step-by-step manner. So if you want a quick solution, I would suggest do not use design thinking for that particular problem state. If it is something which has a reasonable amount of complexity, you have the luxury of time to include people, brainstorm and do it, then you apply design thinking. The second myth I want to bust about design thinking is that design thinking is a linear process. Sorry, it's a sequential process, but it is not linear. It is cyclical or iterative. If you look at the design thinking framework, there's a famous Stanford model. It will show 5 stages appearing in sequence. But what is very, very important for a design thinking practitioner is that although the stages are in sequence, they are not linear in the sense you don't do stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 4, and 5 and stop. It doesn't happen like that. Design thinking puts you through an iteration at any stage. When your prototype fails a test, you may have to go back to the first stage. You may have to go back to the second stage. So any number of iterations can happen. So it is sequential, but not linear. It is iterative. So definitely requires a lot of patience and understanding. So you have to be a designer in your mind if you have to practice design thinking, right? The third myth I want to bust about design thinking is that it's not something where you will find success very easily. It's not obvious success. So if people come back and tell me that I applied design thinking and it failed, I'll say, good, it failed, right? Because design thinking is something which helps you to fail early. So if you are failing at the end when you're launching the product or your service, and then you encounter failure, it simply means you haven't applied design thinking. Because the iterations that it does, it lets you go back, it lets you fail the prototype testing, it helps you to go back, again, make changes, again, test your prototype. It keeps making you fail so early that you do all the course corrections before you launch the product or service. So design thinking is something which, if it makes you fail, there's nothing to feel bad about, because if you've failed early, you have not lost anything at all. You still have time, you have not lost money, you have not lost the effort. You can still do a lot of things before you launch, and success of that will be a lot more better. So these are some of the myths which come to me at the top of my mind when it comes to design thinking, because I often encounter people assuming that they have used design thinking, and they say that I have included everybody in whatever I'm designing, and therefore this is design thinking. But I just want to clarify here that just being inclusive of everybody is not design thinking. In design thinking, if I am the designer, if I am the lead designer, I am not going to be solving the problem myself. I include everybody, not because I know the solution. I'm including everybody there, all stakeholders, so that they can look at the problem from their perspective, and they may be able to come up with brighter and better ideas and solutions. So these are a few of the things that one needs to understand very well before claiming that we are design thinking practitioners. So it always makes sense to take a step back, understand the whole framework of design thinking, the methodology, where to apply it, when to apply it, internalize all the steps, and be very conscious when you're doing it. Right from the empathy stage to the testing stage, you have to be very conscious that you're not applying a traditional thinking mindset, but you're actually applying a design thinking mindset.
So, Harini, I think we have covered all the important points, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your opinion on the design thinking when we talk about the design thinking in HR. Thank you so much for joining us and being
Pleasure
here.
is all mine, and I must thank SightsIn Plus for having me over as a writer in the magazine several times. And I know that I've been many a time I've responded in short notice, but it's been a pleasure writing about topics in HR, specifically topics around design thinking in HR. And speaking about the same to you right now, Romeshji, has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. We always look forward to support for the same.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.